there, boys and girls. So today we are going to be talking about relationships. No, I don't mean boyfriend and girlfriend. I'm talking about all kinds of relationships. I'm talking about our characters in our books that we read and their relationships with other characters. You have relationships with all different kinds of people. You have a relationship with your mom and dad. Your mom and dad are your parents and you are their child. You have a relationship with Mrs. Belford. Mrs. Belford is your teacher and you're her student. You have relationships with your friends, right? In today's lesson, you're going to compare our characters' relationships with other people to your own relationships. If we're talking about Frannie, we want to think about who does Frannie have a relationship with? So take a second. What kinds of other characters are in this book that Frannie has a relationship with? What do you guys think? Awesome. You may have thought of Elliott, who she says is her best friend. You could have thought of her mom and her dad. And I noticed that in our book club meeting the other day, some of you said that her mom thinks that Frannie's really funny, so they might have a funny relationship. And her dad gave her those resume papers, so you may think that they have a good relationship because he trusts her, even after what she did on her last field trip. Any other relationships that you guys are thinking of? Yeah, you may have thought of Frannie and Mrs. P. What kind of relationship do you think Frannie and Mrs. P have? Yeah, Mrs. P is Frannie's teacher. So Frannie seems to like Mrs. P. She might be scared of Mrs. P sometimes. For example, when Mrs. P wanted to talk to Frannie's parents, she probably didn't like that too much. Our learning target for today is I can notice what a character's relationships show. I want you to pay attention to how Frannie interacts with different characters. It's been a few days since you've listened to our last chapter, so I want to go over a little bit about what happened. Remember, Frannie and her classmates are on this field trip to the radio show, the Sandy's Sander show, and the tour is about to start. But Frannie really has to go to the bathroom. She's afraid of asking Mrs. Pellington if she could go to the bathroom because all of her classmates are standing there and she doesn't want to raise her hand and say, I have to go to the bathroom. She is too embarrassed to do it. So that's where we left off. And my question for you in our last lesson was to make a prediction of what Frannie would do. We'll see what happens. Chapter 7. The tour guide's hair was dyed purple, but just at her bangs. I wondered if her parents were really mad about that. She became very bouncy. I think she was even more excited than we were. I guess Elizabeth already forgot the part about not being rude, because before she could stop it, she blurted, "Where's my dad?" "He's doing his show, silly. And when he's done at 10 o'clock, he will show you all the inside of the actual radio studio, and you will each get the chance to sit in the host's chair." That's where we all oohed and ahed. "Okay, class, let's get in line," Mrs. Pellington said. I took Millicent's hand with my left one and held my briefcase with my right. We followed the tour guide down the hallway. The tour guide's name was Tuesday. I have never heard a person named after a day of the week. This was very interesting to me, especially because Tuesday was not actually the best day of the week. Off the long hallway were some of the 20 offices that Mr. Sanders had told us about. I tried to peek and see what radio offices looked like, but we were walking too fast. All I saw was a tray with a stack of paper in it. When I got home, I had to remember to put a tray with a stack of paper on my desk. Finally, we stood in front of a huge glass window, and inside we saw Mr. Sanders wearing headphones and talking and laughing into a microphone. There was a machine in front of him with a lot of buttons, and Mr. Sanders pressed some, but not others. He looked really professional with headphones on. It was the most gigantic room ever. There was a big black sign in red neon. It yelled, "On air!" When I got home, I also had to remember to make an on-air sign for my bedroom. The door to the studio was really thick and had a sign that read, "Do not open this door." There were so many things that I needed to remember, but I was in pain because I really had to go to the bathroom. We'll come back when the show is over, and then we'll go inside, and Mr. Sanders will give everyone a chance in front of the microphone, Tuesday said. Now, I want to give you a tour of the offices. How would I pay attention to all the offices if the only thing I could think about was how badly I had to go to the bathroom? Everyone started to follow Tuesday down the hall, and I raised my arm, and Mrs. Pellington called on me. I waved my hand at her so she'd come over to me and I could whisper. When she bent down, I said very quietly, "I really have to go to the bathroom." She gave me a bothered look, but then called Tuesday over, who said the bathroom was right down the hall. Millicent and I ran down the hall with my briefcase, slapping against my leg, and when I opened the bathroom door, Millicent banged on it. Do you know why? Because she was reading, while she was running. "Millicent," I scolded, "you're not paying attention." "I am too paying attention," she said. But in the book, Jackie just told Joanna a secret, but Joanna got the secret wrong. Secrets interested me. Maybe Millicent could tell me the secret later when we weren't rushing. The bathroom was the biggest I've ever seen. It was as big as the radio studio. There was an actual real chair like the kind we had at our home in our living room. And there was a basket of makeup that was free. And another basket with candy. This made Millicent put down her book. Elliott was not going to believe this. I went to the bathroom as fast as is scientifically possible, and then Millicent and I went to catch up with our class. But when we came out of the bathroom, our class wasn't standing where it stood before. We didn't see anyone anywhere. I looked at Millicent, who looked just as confused as I was. "What should we do?" she asked. "I don't know." She grabbed my hand and ran down the hall. As we neared the studio door, I noticed that it was open and no one was inside hosting the show. That was not a good sign, and I knew it. I looked at the clock and it said 9:45 a.m. That meant there were only 15 minutes left of the show, which meant it was the end of the show, which meant it was the call-in part of the show, the part where Mr. Sanders gave advice. Maybe my parents weren't the only ones who thought he wasn't good at this part of the show. Maybe someone told him and he got upset and left. What if he was crying all by himself in the office? If that was the case, then who would do the advice part? I know that I give really good advice because sometimes my dad says to me, "Good advice, Bird." I felt bad Mr. Sanders was so upset that he had to leave his own show, but I also knew the saying, "The show must go on." I couldn't go on without Mr. Sanders, though. Unless... I looked at Millicent, who looked stumpified. "We had to go in there to help Mr. Sanders," I said. "We're not allowed," she protested. "But it's an emergency," I cried. Mr. Sanders was going to really appreciate this. He'd probably give me my own radio show. I grabbed Millicent's hand and ran inside the studio. What do you guys think? Do you think this is a good idea? I don't know. We'll have to see. She closed the door behind us and looked really worried. "We're going to get in trouble," she said. I ran over to Mr. Sanders' chair and put my briefcase on the table. Then I clicked it wide open and took out the things that made me look workerish. I put the glasses with no lenses on my face, but they were too big and fell off. Then I sat in Mr. Sanders' chair, which was still warm, and put on his headphones. Those slid right off my head too, but I adjusted them so they fit better. When I looked over at Millicent, she had forgotten about getting in trouble because she was on the floor reading the last page of her book. Just then, I heard a smacking sound. There was a man behind a glass window, and he had the headphones on too. He was banging on the glass and pointing. I gave a big smile because I knew he was trying to thank me for saving the day. Do you think the man was trying to thank Frannie for saving the day? No, probably not. He was probably doing what? Yeah, getting her attention, because she probably isn't supposed to be on the radio, right? Just then the phone rang and I looked at Millicent. Should I answer it? Without looking up, she said, "Well, it is the advice part of the show." She was right. It was the advice part of the show. I had to press the blinking light. I had to answer the phone. As I reached toward the blinking light, there was even more banging on the window. Now a different man was making signals with his hands. He looked like an umpire in a baseball game. And since my dad watches baseball games, I know what the signals mean. When the umpire shakes his head no while moving a hand across his neck, it means you're out. That was what the man was doing. He was saying that Mr. Sanders was out, which meant he was in big trouble. A different man was making the safe sign, which meant I was safe to answer the phone. Uh-oh. I don't know, I feel bad about this one. What do you guys think? I pressed the red blinking button. Then some people in the booth slapped their palms against their forehead. Another guy put his head down on the table. They were really impressed. Hello? I heard my hello fill the headphones. I was a radio host. I was saving the day. I was on air. It was the best feeling in the entire world, and that is not an opinion. And that's where we're going to stop. This might be a great time to make a prediction. What do you think is going to happen to Frannie? We'll have to see. But we want to go back to talking about relationships. Some of the characters that we noticed in this chapter were obviously Frannie, Millicent, and Mrs. Pellington, right? And you could also say Tuesday. We met Tuesday, the tour guide. But I want you to notice the relationship between Frannie and Millicent. What do you notice about that relationship? Would you say they're friends? Would you say that Frannie is a bad influence on Millicent? Meaning that Frannie makes bad choices and that may rub off on Millicent. Maybe she'll start making bad choices. I also want you to think about the relationship between Frannie and Mrs. Pellington. When Frannie asked Mrs. Pellington if she could go to the bathroom, did you notice something about what Mrs. Pellington did? Yeah, if you don't remember, Mrs. Pellington gave her kind of a weird look. The author said, she gave me a bothered look. So what do you think about the relationship between Frannie and Mrs. P? You can also use what you know from listening to previous chapters. So boys and girls, after you listen to this reading, there's a graphic organizer where you can write down what you think about the relationship between Frannie and Millicent and Frannie and Mrs. Pellington. Remember, it's important to learn about a character by looking at their relationships with other characters in the story. So tomorrow, we're going to continue reading Frankly Frannie with Chapter 8 and Chapter 9. So you get a double reading that tomorrow. I hope you enjoyed this chapter. We'll have to see what happens with Frannie. It sounds like she kind of does whatever she wants, right? Have a wonderful day. Stay safe and healthy. If you have any questions, please let me know. I will see you tomorrow. Bye, guys.